Hello, this is Scott Carpenter, and welcome to the Sasquatch Awareness Project. Tonight I want to start part 2 of what is a Sasquatch Bigfoot, and we're going to talk first about their behavior and in general. Now, the Sasquatch has will, intellect, they're very intelligent, they have emotion, desires, needs, wants. They're just like we are. And when you encounter one, you don't really know what state of mind the Sasquatch is in. And just like human beings, these different emotions and these desires and whatever motives are going on, it will influence their behavior. And you have to remember that each Sasquatch is an individual person. I guess that's the best way to say it. They're an individual. They have their own emotions. They have their own thoughts. They're not a dumb animal. So whenever you encounter one, or you have encountered one, their behavior may not be like all the others. Now, in general, as a group of beings, as a population, they have common behaviors and they do similar things, but they're unique, just like people are. And different nationalities have different customs, and in different areas of the country, we speak a little different, we look a little different, have a different accent. And the same is true with the Sasquatch, depending on what part of the country and what clan you're dealing with. They could have customs and behaviors just like we do. It's just the same. So one has to be aware of that you're not dealing with a dumb animal, you're not dealing with a bipedal ape, you're dealing with a human hybrid that has an extremely high intellect. I would say on average probably smarter than human beings, and except they have their slower ones and ones that have mental issues, but for the most part they're extremely intelligent, and they have knowledge of and abilities that we don't understand, and abilities to do things that we don't understand how they do them. And I don't, a lot of people like to attribute supernatural or woo's another word they use, or they have these sort of abilities, and I like to think it's just, and I not like to think, I do think that this is just knowledge and technology that we're unaware of. It doesn't make it magic. It doesn't make it paranormal. It just means that they have abilities to and knowledge that we don't have, and they can manipulate matter and sound like we can't, and they have an understanding of the ether and the world around them. So keep that in mind if you ever encounter one, or if you've had an encounter and you're dealing with some unusual things that they did that you're having a hard time stuffing in your brain, which I understand that is some of the things that they do and can do are beyond our capability sometimes to comprehend it, because it's something we've never seen, never been taught, or never understood existed. So always be aware of that. Let's talk about encounters. Most of the time when someone has a Sasquatch encounter, it only lasts a few seconds. It's very brief, and most people don't get a chance to even photograph them or get their phone out. And so, lots of times, I'm a researcher, and I've had encounters and never thought to raise my camera up, just because of the magnitude of it, and it's mind-blowing. I struggle to describe it now, as you can hear me. It's when you have an encounter, it really just takes you aback. You can get in that brain fog situation where you're just in awe and you can't believe what you're seeing, and the brain doesn't kick in, and you're just kind of like witnessing what's going on, watching what's going on, and then it's over. And like I said, it only lasts a few seconds, and fortunate are those that have a camera out or have a situation where they can put a camera on one. Or, lots of times, even though, they may have their cell phone out, the Sasquatch is 30 feet away, 40 feet away in heavy cover, and, it's just a blob, and you get your blob squatch. Some of the more common encounters are the Sasquatch will follow people and observe people while you're hiking or biking or doing outdoor activities. Many times the Sasquatch will be lurking around your residence or lurking around your farm or your property, hiding and peeking. Many times a child will catch a glimpse of one watching them play, or you'll feel like you're being watched while you're doing something, in the yard or on the farm, and you'll turn around just in time to catch out of the corner of your eye, the Sasquatch moving away. They can be very scary. They can be very loud. Some of the more common experiences are actually loud roars and loud displays, banging on wood, breaking of limbs, pushing trees down, roars that have been described, as a combination of a lion and a dinosaur. In my opinion, all meant to scare you or to push you away and get you out of the area. Objects being thrown, that's another one. Encounter that many people have. Rocks, small pebbles to boulders. Boulders being thrown in lakes and rivers near where someone's fishing or canoeing or camping. Small pebbles being thrown as you're walking, acorns or other small things, sticks being thrown. But many times it's just, small rocks and things being thrown at you. One of the more disconcerting things is an encounter where you have a Sasquatch peering in the window at you or at a family member. And there's many encounters like this where, especially out in rural areas, people will feel like they're being watched or doing something in the house and look at the window, and there's a set of eyes or a face in the window looking at them. There are many times when the Sasquatch will actually reach in the window. There's also the encounters, and it's really rare when a human being will actually get the drop on a Sasquatch. And I'm of the thought, and I think that 99% of the time when you see a Sasquatch, they want you to see them, or they allow you to see them, or they knew you were there, and them letting you see them is a consequence of something going on. But every now and then we'll get the drop on them. It's usually in a hunting situation where hunters, have come in really early in the morning and moved into the area, got up in a tree stand, and then, several hours later the Sasquatch moves through the area. That's the most common. Sometimes there are, someone will catch a Sasquatch involved in an activity, and basically they're just like us, so they're not paying attention to their surroundings like they're supposed to. They are super, like SEAL Team 6, but they're fallible, and sometimes, one of the reports I got, a doctor was hiking in the Smokies, came up over a small rise in the trail, and about 30 feet the rise came up, and down was a small stream, and he surprised a large Sasquatch that was bent over and cupping his hands and drinking. And people have, situations like this. People have come around sharp curves and on their mountain bikes and surprised them, and that sort of thing. And many times when that happens, they look just as shocked as the human beings do. So, but that's another encounter that happens that's common. Now I wanted to talk about the more bizarre encounters that one can have with the Sasquatch, because though they're not as common as the other ones I just mentioned, they do happen. And it can be troubling and disturbing when it does. So one of the things that happen to people, and it really freaks them out, is what's called mind speak, and that is when the Sasquatch projects itself a voice inside your head and talks to you inside your head. And many people that have this experience. It's not like a long conversation. It's like they're doing an activity and they'll hear a voice in their head said stop or leave or don't go there or don't do that. It's usually a warning or something like that, or someone encounters a Sasquatch and in their head they hear you need to leave now, or it's a rock throwing or incident, or some sort of outburst incident where they're yelling and screaming and the person will hear in their head you need to leave, go, I don't want you here, leave. So it's usually that's the more common type. Now there are some that there's longer sentences or longer, more I guess complex things that are communicated, but for the most part it's just short, and it's in your head, and it fits the situation, like leave, go. Some people have been warned of danger, don't do that or don't go there. And so but it's really troubling when it happens, especially for someone who has no clue that Sasquatch even exists. And then they have, number one, they're having this encounter, physical encounter in the real world where rocks are being thrown or they're actually seeing the creature. Then boom, this, something pops into their head and they hear a voice in their head, telling them something. You can imagine it'll really freak somebody out. Another encounter type that has happened is, and it's really would freak me out if it happened to me, and thank God it's never happened to me, but as a Sasquatch literally appearing or manifesting or coming inside the house, and being inside the house the person sees it and then it disappears. And in fact, I have a good personal friend that lived in Kentucky for a while doing some research, and they had one of those grass mats, like the heavy grass mats that you put at the back door of your mud room. And they woke up one morning to find a single pristine, like 15, 16-inch footprint, Sasquatch footprint, depressed into that rug. And this was behind closed doors, like in a foyer area. And the ceiling was only about 6.5 or 7 foot, but you had this huge print. So, though it's not real common, it can happen. And again, I can imagine this is pretty, I say I imagine it's pretty, no, it would be very disturbing to have that happen. But that's something that we need to be aware of, and it can happen. Another thing that one may see is a Sasquatch in what is known as cloaked mode, or it's invisible. We use the common word cloak in the research community, and that seems to fit it best, but you could also say they're invisible, and this could come in many different manifestations. Like one of them is people will describe seeing a distortion of light. In other words, they'll see something moving, something like the Predator, where there's a distortion, a see-through distortion. Some people have reported actually visually watching a Sasquatch and then watching it gradually disappear. And I know of one witness who actually saw a Sasquatch walking through the woods, and from the waist up it was visible, from the waist down it was invisible, couldn't see it. I've had other people report hearing footsteps, and they couldn't see any distortion. There was no anything visible. It wasn't even like a cloak mode, but they literally heard it coming. They could see the depressions in the leaves, and when it went by them, they felt it. In other words, they felt just like you would feel if someone walked by you close. You feel their presence. They could feel the wind off their body. They literally felt that, but there was nothing. There was nothing to see, nothing to smell. You know, there wasn't anything but the sound and the leaves being depressed as it was walking. Another thing that many people will see or have happen is what is the single footprint, and it's usually like around their home. And this has happened to me. And you know, I live in a residential neighborhood in a small community, and on multiple occasions I found one single footprint. I found two or three that were almost pristine, and they were placed in an area, you know, where that was conducive to make them, in the dust or in a place of soft ground instead of the grass. You know, they wanted me to find it. It's almost like a signature to say, hey, we were here. And then I found all kinds of partials, like front of foots, where they step over fences and stuff, and the foot will come down, and you'll get, you know, 3 or 4 toes in the ball of the foot, or you'll get a heel mark where they've landed or moved around. But it's puzzling why they do it. I think part of it, or a lot of it, is just as a signature to let you know that they were there. And then sometimes they just are, especially if they know you well enough or they're familiar with the area, and they are not real keen on hiding their presence, they'll go ahead and leave partial prints going in and out of your property or on your property somewhere. So it's not uncommon to find those single prints. Another thing, and this is gets into an area that we don't know what we're dealing with, but it's common to have happen during a Sasquatch encounter or in concert with one, and that's orbs. And these orbs come in all kinds of colors: red, green, blue, white, yellow, orange. And people have reported seeing Sasquatch, during a Sasquatch encounter, these orbs flying above the heads, or just in like an orbit around the Sasquatch, or like right after a Sasquatch sighting or before a Sasquatch sighting, they'll spot an orb. So there's a lot of theories on what these orbs are, and later in the series I'll probably go a little bit deeper in that. But as far as encounters, I'd say 10% of the time an orb is related somehow or some way to that encounter. Another thing that can happen, or another thing that they do during an encounter, is doorknob jiggling and shaking, or knocking or pushing or slapping the side of a house. That's reported sometimes. The person won't see what's doing it, or they'll see a shadow, or they'll find a footprint, but that during the evening, it's like the Sasquatch will go around and check the doorknobs and rattle the doorknobs. They'll slap on the side of the house. They'll press their faces against windows. They'll walk around and make creaking noises as they're walking on people's porches or on their decks. So that's also a common thing. One thing that I've had a lot of encounters with, or a lot of experiences with, is what I call the mumbling, or the voices. And many times during while I'm hiking, I will catch wind of like two people are talking, and they're talking just out of ear range, and so it's like a mumbling. But they're people, and you can tell they're speaking to each other, but you just almost can hear them. And I've actually been with several people when we've all heard it. And I was in the Smoky Mountains with like me and I guess there was 4 or 5 of us, and we'd stopped to take a break, and we heard what we thought were people walking up a lower trail, and they were talking, and there was more. And to be honest with you, it sounded like more than one individual was talking, and and you could almost make out what they were talking about. So we all kind of said, well, there's somebody coming, and so we all stopped and were literally looking down the trail. And then a couple of minutes passed, and a couple more minutes passed, and we're looking at each other, and it's like, where do these people go? And so we walked, you know, a couple of us walked down there to look down the trail, and there was no one. So the Sasquatch, you know, that's another encounter, or a more stranger type of encounter that you can have with these things. Uh, the feeling of being watched, of course, we've talked about that, but you know, lots of times, you know, that's all you'll have. You know, you'll be camping, fishing, hunting. You'll be on your backyard, and you'll just get the hair on the back of the neck feeling, and the radar goes up, the antenna go up, and you know you're being watched, but you can't, you know, you can't figure out from where. And so that's another type of encounter why it's not, you know, you don't see one, or you don't have the footprints or those other things. And you can't 100% attribute that to the Sasquatch. If you're in an area that's prone and the Sasquatch are living in the area, that's something also be aware of, you know, and it can happen. You know, one of the things, you know, that you have to be aware of is the Sasquatch can show up at any place at any time. And when I mean that, I mean they can show up in a city, they can show up in a small town, they can show up in a rural area. Like I said, I'm in a small rural city. It's on the foothills of the Smokies, and they traverse my city at night. And I've even had reports of people in, you know, larger cities or suburbs of larger cities that live in apartments actually come out of their apartment and, you know, like look across the parking lot and stand beside the dumpster as a Sasquatch looking at them. And there's not, you know, there are not woods close. You know, there may be a small strip of grass and some trees, you know, between parking lots. But you know, right before daylight or right at daylight, this person reported the Sasquatch was standing there staring at them. So just be aware of that too, can happen. The next thing I want to talk about is written language. And during my research, I discovered that the Sasquatch can use syllabics. And syllabics is a phonetic language of symbols. And each symbol, you know, has a sound associated with it. And then you put those together, and you know, you form sentences and words. The Cree Indians use syllabics quite a bit. And I discovered this by, during my research, I had a flat stone, old piece of concrete, and I put a smiley face on it. And I would come back and they would move the rocks in these weird looking, like one, you know, like a C with one rock over, or some, you know, they would move these rocks around. Well, they kept making this C with a little rock, you know, on the back side of the C, and I'll put pictures of it in the video. And so I started looking around trying to figure out what this meant, and I'd heard an interview where a Native American woman talked about the fact that they use syllabics, and you know, they would draw it in the ground, and that's how they would communicate with the elders of her tribe. So I said, oh, let's see. And sure enough, the dot with a dot followed by a capital C is actually syllabics, and when you look it up phonetically for what it means, or what the phonetics are for it, it's vata, wata, vada, and wada. So, you know, looking at researching this, looking at the Cherokee and the language for these words, sure enough, actually, I found cross-referencing this in Cheyenne, Cherokee, Cree, and Blackfoot. And I also compared it to Mary Green's book, in her book, the 50 Years of Bigfoot, Tennessee Chronicles of Coexistence. I was able to find in more than one language that phrase. And what that phrase means is to come here, come and see, or visit. That's what wa means, and ta means brother or friend. So you put it together and it says come here, friend or brother, or come visit, friend or brother. So I thought that very interesting. Spoken language. They have a spoken language. They can mimic us, and I think they understand English and many other languages. They kind of adapt to the language of the area they're in. Down in the swamps of Louisiana and Mississippi, they've been heard speaking Creole and other dialects down there in French. They understand Native American languages, Cherokee, and others. Of course, they use sign language, and they can use universal sign language. And during my research days, in an outing with Dave Pilates, actually came in and went with me. We were able to record. I actually had a video going. Never turned it off. Had my video camera going, and we got yelled at. And Scott Nelson actually, and I'll put the recording in the video for you. But he actually, he verified. Scott Nelson did. He's a Navy linguist who is famous for discovering that, the Sasquatch he didn't discover it, but he was able to codify the fact that the Sasquatch do have a language, and the Sierra sounds by Ron Moorhead and other sounds that were recorded were actually a language, and they were speaking intelligently, and it had phonetics and consonants and vowels and those sort of things. It had structure. It had a language. It was a language, and it had structure. So he was able to translate that, and I'll pop that up in the video. Well, I can show it here if you want to do. Let's see. Right there. Sorry about the screen, but that's his. Those are the sounds and what he translated. So there we go. Back on me. So they have a spoken language. It's coded communications. The Sasquatch appear to communicate with each other in different coded communications. What we think is, very simple, sticks banging, clanging, rocks clacking, whoops, hollers, those sort of things. We interpret that as, that's some dumb animal, they're just doing this. But I think it's just so much deeper than that. They use these as codes, and so what they'll do is before they go out to do whatever they're doing, whether it's watching a trail or moving around the area, they set the codes for the day. And I've seen this in the Smokies. Whoop, maybe whoop for every person you see, or would not for every person you see, or a rock clack, or a tree knock, and it changes every day. It's not the same. And so, they use these coded communications, and it's a common tactic, and it works well. And while the average person may hear a wood knock or may hear a whoop that they'll attribute to to some sort of wild animal, many times these are the Sasquatch doing communications, coded over great distances, or from one hillside to the other. They'll also use bird calls, owl calls. They can mimic just about anything, so it's not uncommon to hear out-of-place owl calls or out-of-place bird calls if they're either the wrong season, the wrong location, the wrong time of day. I've especially heard the owl calls at the wrong time of day, and they're very good, but especially their owl calls, the ones here, their owl calls are just a smidge off. There's just something, you can tell it's almost like it's being made by an artificial source. But many of their bird calls are just dead on, and that sort of thing. Of course, sometimes I've heard songbird calls in the middle of the night, and why sometimes songbirds do call each other in the middle of the night. This was during the winter when it was very cold, and I'm sorry that songbirds are roosting or So those that don't stay locally have already left the area for warmer climates. So, and that's just something you learn through experience, But those are, the code of communications are another thing that they use, and they use them expertly. So let's talk about their social structure. Um, Basically, at the Sasquatch live in clan and family groups, and there'll be a bunch of family groups that make up a loose clan, and usually these clans are of related Sasquatch, so they're family clans, and it's kind of a clan structure. The family group will consist of a parent, two parents, and at least one child, and then depending on the dynamics of that group, sometimes the females, once they mature, will hang around for a little while before they find mates. Most of the time, I've found that the males, once they mature and can fend for themselves, are encouraged to get mates and start their own family group. Now, they're of course loosely associated and become part of that clan, but that seems to be the structure. They don't get any larger than clans. And I can't give you a number, but the clans could be 75 to 100, but they keep spread out and they stay on the move, and they try to move around the area so not to establish patterns. They're very keen on keeping their patterns random. While they may have places they stay in, caves and in hidden places and places they like to frequent and forage for food, they're very cognizant of staying hidden, and so they'll rotate and they'll move and they'll change. There are loners, and you'll have those, encounter those from time to time. I think loners sometimes are usually males, or maybe a female on a mission going somewhere. I think Bobby Short encountered a female one time with a baby, by herself on on her way to, like I said, she was walking with a purpose. And like I said, sometimes you'll encounter a lone male for whatever reason, but for the most part, if you encounter a Sasquatch, they're not alone. You may only see one, but you can almost guarantee they're traveling in a group. They always travel almost in groups, but there are the rare loners. Like I said before, they appear to mate. They appear to select a mate and stick with that mate, or I have heard witnesses, where there's been more than one female with a male. Now, could that have been his daughter? Who knows? But for the most part, it appears that they do. It's a male and a female, and then the children. Their habitation range. It's been my experience. They have a home range. And here in East Tennessee, from the ones I've encountered, I would say the range is about 100 square miles from a central point, and so they have a territory and a range. They seem to stay within that range. I haven't seen any major migrations. There's, depending on the time of year and how much foliage is on, they will leave some areas and not come back during the winter and they'll show back up in the spring when the foliage begins to thicken up. And they definitely have a winter range and a summer range. Of course, here in East Tennessee, there's no elk or other large herd animals to follow. I know out west they'll follow the elk herds, they'll follow the game, just much like the American Indians would follow the game. But here in East Tennessee, they're much more acclimated to living off of living on the outskirts of civilization, and then foraging both for natural food and our food. They're definitely dumpster dive and don't have any problem doing it. Conflicts. Sasquatches can have conflicts. They're just like human beings. They have disagreements and they have fights. And I don't know if they have wars, but I know that there are disagreements. It can be over a mate. It can be over other things. And there's more than one account, and I have reported to me of two male Sasquatch going at it, and they go at it for keeps. So these can happen. Their general demeanor, a Sasquatch is going, first and foremost, avoid human contact. Avoid being detected or seen. That is number one. And everything that they do is centered around that one key aspect. Do not be observed, do not be seen, do not be discovered. Keep your existence, keep yourself hidden. And they'll do everything they can to prevent that. Rule number 2 for them is don't get your picture taken. I mean, do not get your picture taken. They will do anything and everything they can to avoid that. It's the last resort that they allow themselves to be photographed. And it's usually as a distraction or something of that nature, or it's a situation where they get stuck out in the open, and it's the less of two evils. So but they will avoid the camera. They know what it is, they know how it operates, and they know what it does. And for some people that's a hard pill to swallow, but they do. So that's number 2. That's rule number 2. And I've said this before in a recent video. People have got to understand that they have a whole range of emotions, and when you encounter a Sasquatch, you've got to understand that they're just like us. You don't know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what the bigger situation is for them. Are they in a conflict? Are they hunting game? Have they just had an argument with their mate? Are they looking for a missing child? Are they depressed? Are they happy? You don't know. You do not know the emotional state when you encounter a Sasquatch. So you have to be aware of that. They can have all those emotions. So you just don't know. That's why I tell people don't go looking for them. Don't seek them out. Because you don't know what this encounter you're wanting to have. You don't know the mental state or the emotional state of the Sasquatch. You just don't know. And why their motives is to get usually the number one motive is to get away from you. I have learned through other eyewitnesses and people who have dealt with them, especially in a habituation situation where the Sasquatch are on their property and they have frequent encounters and interaction with them. This is a hard pill to swallow, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. When a Sasquatch has an encounter with you, it has decisions to make about what it's going to do. Run or hide or mind speak or whatever on that list of things, responses to you. But you have to understand, they don't view human beings like we do. They don't see us the same way. Their culture is not our culture. I can't stress that enough. And I know I'm repeating myself from previous videos, but I'll repeat it over and over again because repetition is how people learn, and people need to hear it. They have this selection list in their minds, and you've got to understand that killing you is on that list. Now, it may be number 99 out of 100 things on that list. But you must understand they don't value human life, not like we do. And they don't see, some of them see us just like they would see a deer or a bear, a wild turkey, and a human being, and we're all on the same level. Excuse me. So you have to understand that somewhere in that list of things, reaction to us, is taking us out, killing us is on that list. And that's hard to hear, but it is. And no matter how good they are, well-intentioned, that's always an option. 99.99999% of the time, that option's never taken. And I can't cite for you a modern incident where they have killed people. Now, I can go back into history, and we have several reports in the 1800s and the turn of the century where they did kill people, usually in a self defense situation. But there are accounts where some Sasquatch clans or family groups go rogue, and they begin to cannibalize people and eat people, human beings. I mean, so while that's very rare, there are reports of it happening. So that's why you have to be aware and understand that they don't see us like on equal par with them. We're below them, and one must understand that. So on that happy note, but it's time to close here with part 2 of what is the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and next week we'll start on what does the Sasquatch look like, and we'll get into the fun part of looking at pictures and videos and discussing actually what they look like, in the wild, and the different variations there are. So until next time, y'all I swear I can't speak tonight. So until the next time, everybody be safe, be careful out there, God bless, and we'll talk to you soon.